Welcome to Japanese Sleep Whispers, your sanctuary for peaceful nights and gentle dreams. Here, you will find calming bedtime stories inspired by the timeless beauty and traditions of Japan. Each story is read slowly in a soothing voice, accompanied by natural sounds such as flowing rivers and the tranquil rhythm of shishi-odoshi. Whether you seek relaxation, relief from stress, or help falling asleep, these tales invite you to drift away into a world of serenity. Imagine quiet temples, moonlit gardens, and the whispering bamboo forests as you listen. If you'd like these soothing stories to be part of your nightly routine, consider subscribing so they're always with you when you need them. Subscribe and let these stories be your nightly ritual of calm and rest. Thank you for being here. May you always find peace in every moment. The bamboo sways in evening wind. Prologue whispers in the grove. The bamboo grove lay at the edge of the village, where the mountains began to fold into mist. In the fading light of evening, each stalk rose tall and slender, its emerald sheen softened by shadows. The wind came gently, carrying with it a low rustling, like countless voices murmuring secrets too delicate for words. Akihiro paused at the narrow path leading inward. He had walked this way many times before as a boy, but tonight it felt different. The grove seemed alive, watching, listening. He placed a hand upon a bamboo stalk, cool and smooth beneath his palm. The rustle of the leaves grew louder, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he heard words. "Bend, but do not break." He pulled his hand away quickly, his breath catching. Perhaps it was only his imagination, or perhaps the wind itself spoke through the hollow reeds. The evening deepened, and the first stars faintly appeared above the horizon. Akihiro felt something stir within him, a question, an unease he could not name. He stepped into the grove, the path swallowed by the swaying stalks. The world behind him faded, replaced by a rhythm of wind and leaves. The journey, though he did not yet know it, had begun. Chapter 1: The Silent Path. The path wound deeper into the grove, narrow and uneven, lined with moss that glowed faintly in the twilight. Akihiro walked slowly, his sandals brushing against fallen leaves. Though the wind stirred above, within the grove itself, there was a hushed stillness, broken only by the occasional creak of bamboo bowing against its neighbor. He remembered his grandfather's words from long ago: the bamboo endures the storm because it bows to it. The oak breaks because it resists. At the time, he had not understood. Now, surrounded by countless stalks rising toward the heavens, he began to feel their meaning. A small stream crossed the path ahead, its water clear, whispering over stones worn smooth by time. Akihiro crouched to drink, cupping the cool water in his hands. As he raised it to his lips, he noticed a reflection, his own face, but altered, softened by the rippling current. Behind the reflection, a lantern seemed to glow faintly, though when he looked up, there was nothing there. He sat upon a flat stone, listening. The grove was quiet, yet not empty. The silence carried weight, as if inviting him to set aside the noise of his thoughts. For the first time in many years, he closed his eyes and simply breathed. When he opened them again, the evening wind had shifted. The bamboo swayed in unison, as though acknowledging his stillness. The path ahead seemed darker, but also more certain. Akihiro rose, his heart lighter, though questions remained. He tightened his robe against the cool air and continued forward, guided by nothing but the sound of the bamboo's whisper. Somewhere deeper in the grove, he thought he heard the faint toll of a distant bell. Chapter 2: The Song of Cicadas. As Akihiro pressed deeper into the bamboo grove, the silence shifted. The air grew warmer, and with it came a chorus, first faint, then swelling until it filled the entire grove. Cicadas. Their cries rose and fell like waves, thousands of voices layered upon one another, a rhythm older than memory. He stopped to listen. At first, the sound felt overwhelming, a clamor against the stillness of his thoughts. But as he lingered, the rhythm unfolded. Each cry was distinct, yet together they formed a single resonance, a pattern that was not chaos but harmony. The grove seemed alive with this chorus. The cicada's song pulsed through the bamboo stalks, through the earth beneath his feet, through his own chest. He realized he had never truly listened before, not to cicadas, not to the wind, not even to himself. A memory came unbidden. As a child, he had once complained to his mother that the cicadas were too loud, disturbing his study. She had only smiled and said, "When you hear their voices, it means summer is alive. Do not mistake life for noise." He exhaled slowly, allowing the sound to pass through him rather than resist it. In the cries of the cicadas, he sensed impermanence. Their season was short, their lives fleeting, yet they poured everything into this brief moment. The sun dipped lower, painting the bamboo tips in shades of amber. The cicadas grew louder still, their chorus swelling like a final burst of energy before nightfall. And as he walked, Akihiro felt the stirring of something within, a reminder that his own life, too, was brief, and that perhaps he had not yet truly lived it. When the song finally softened, he bowed slightly toward the grove. "Thank you," he whispered, surprising himself. The cicadas answered with one last united cry, then fell into stillness as the evening deepened. Chapter 3: The Monk by the Stream. Not long after the cicada's chorus faded, Akihiro followed the sound of running water until he reached a wider stream. Its surface caught the last light of day, shimmering like scattered gold. Beside it sat a figure in worn robes, head bowed, hands folded loosely in his lap. The monk did not move as Akihiro approached, nor did he seem startled. His presence blended with the stream, as though he had been sitting there since the beginning of time. "Good evening," Akihiro said, hesitant. The monk opened his eyes, calm and steady. "Evening to you. The bamboo tells me you are searching." Akihiro blinked. "The bamboo told you?" The monk smiled faintly. Everything speaks, if one learns how to listen. He gestured to the stream. Sit. Akihiro obeyed, settling onto the cool grass. The monk closed his eyes once more, breathing slowly. For a long while, they sat in silence, listening to the water rush over stones, the occasional rustle of bamboo leaves, the faint stirring of wind. At last, the monk spoke. "Why do you walk the grove?" Akihiro hesitated. "I don't know. Perhaps because I feel restless. As though something is missing." The monk nodded, as though this answer were expected. Restlessness is the beginning of the path. The bamboo sways, and so must you. To be rigid is to break. His words echoed those Akihiro had once heard from his grandfather. He lowered his gaze to the stream. "But how'd I know where the path leads?" "You do not," the monk said simply. "The stream does not ask where it flows. It moves because it must. So too with your steps." The monk reached into his sleeve and drew out a small object, a smooth stone, marked with faint lines carved by water over many years. He placed it into Akihiro's hand. "Carry this. When you feel lost, hold it. Remember the stream's patience." Akihiro closed his fingers around the stone, its coolness grounding him. He bowed deeply. "Thank you." The monk rose, staff in hand, and crossed the stream with quiet steps. He did not look back, disappearing into the deepening dusk. Left alone, Akihiro sat by the water, the stone heavy in his palm. The bamboo above swayed, and the evening wind carried a whisper that felt like an answer he could not yet understand. Chapter 4: Shadows on the Tatami. When Akihiro left the stream, the light of day had nearly gone. He wandered until he reached an abandoned tea house hidden among the bamboo. Its roof was sagging with moss, and its sliding doors were half open, creaking softly whenever the wind stirred. Inside, the air smelled faintly of earth and cedar. Tatami mats stretched across the floor, their woven surfaces worn but intact. Akihiro stepped inside cautiously, the hush of the room wrapping around him. Shadows pooled along the walls, lengthening as the moon rose. He sat upon one of the mats, placing the stone the monk had given him before him like a talisman. The room was empty, yet not silent. The bamboo outside tapped gently against the wood, as if knocking. As his eyes adjusted, he noticed the shadows shifting. The moonlight filtered through the torn paper screens, casting patterns that resembled bamboo stalks swaying. For a moment, it seemed as if the grove itself had entered the room. He remembered sitting with his grandfather years ago in a similar tea house. His grandfather had taught him to watch the shadows, to see not only their shape but the spaces between. "Shadows are not absence," he had said. "They are another form of presence." Now, as the wind outside rose, the shadows lengthened and bent across the tatami, bowing and swaying like dancers. Akihiro lowered his head, breathing slowly, letting the shadows pass over him. The silence deepened. The shadows grew so dark they seemed to dissolve the room itself, until only the faint glow of the moon and the steady rhythm of his breath remained. For a moment, Akihiro wondered if he had left the world entirely. Then, as suddenly as it began, the wind softened. The shadows withdrew. The room was simply a tea-house once more, old and empty. But Akihiro felt changed, as if he had glimpsed something beyond ordinary. Sight something that lived not only in the light but also in the spaces it could not reach. He bowed to the tatami, whispering thanks, and left the tea-house. The bamboo swayed in the evening wind, guiding him onward. Chapter 5 Lanterns along the ridge. The path rose steeply now, leading him out of the grove and onto a ridge overlooking the valley. The night sky spread wide, a sea of stars scattered across the heavens. Along the ridge, stone lanterns stood at intervals, their shapes softened by moss. Each one held a faint flame, flickering but steady, as if they had been lit for him alone. Their warm glow lined the path like guiding stars brought down to earth. Akihiro walked slowly, pausing before each lantern. Some burned brightly, others barely at all. Yet none were extinguished. He felt compelled to bow slightly before each one, as though greeting a guardian. At the highest point of the ridge, he stopped. The valley stretched below, the bamboo grove dark and endless, the village just a cluster of shadows. From here, the world seemed vast and quiet, yet not empty. A breeze swept across the ridge, bending the flames of the lanterns. They flickered in unison, bowing like bamboo in the wind. Akihiro felt the same current within his chest, as if his own heart were swaying with them. He thought of the cicadas' chorus, of the monk's patient stream, of the shadows on the tatami. All were different, yet all were connected voices in the same song. As he stood in silence, one lantern flared suddenly brighter, casting its glow across his face. For a brief moment, he saw a figure standing at the far end of the ridge, tall, cloaked in robes, holding a staff. The figure raised its hand in greeting, then vanished into the night. Akihiro did not feel fear. Instead, he felt a quiet certainty he was not walking this path alone. The lanterns had walked with others before him, and would guide others after. He bowed deeply to the ridge, then continued down the path, the lanterns swaying gently behind him as if watching him go. Chapter 6 The Fox's Watchful Eyes. Descending from the ridge, Akihiro entered a quieter stretch of bamboo where the moonlight barely reached the ground. The air was cool, and the sound of the evening wind seemed to hush itself as he walked. It was then that he sensed eyes upon him. He paused, turning slowly. At the edge of the path, half hidden among stalks, stood a fox. Its coat gleamed pale under the moon, and its eyes glowed with an amber light that seemed almost human. The fox did not flee. Instead, it sat calmly, tail curled neatly around its paws. Akihiro felt an odd calmness in return, though his heart quickened. "Have you been following me?" he whispered, unsure why he spoke aloud. The fox tilted its head, as though amused by the question. Then it rose and began to walk ahead, pausing every few steps to glance back at him. Akihiro understood. He followed. The fox led him deeper into the grove, where the bamboo grew so densely that little light reached through. Yet whenever the shadows seemed too thick, the fox's eyes shone, guiding him. The path was uneven, roots twisting like hidden steps, but he felt no fear while the fox walked before him. Finally, they reached a small clearing. In its center stood a stone basin filled with clear water, reflecting the stars above. The fox stopped at its edge, gazing into the basin as though studying the heavens within it. Akihiro knelt beside the basin. He saw his reflection, pale and weary, but behind it he saw bamboo swaying, cicadas crying, lanterns glowing, a tapestry of all he had witnessed so far. When he looked up, the fox was gone. Only a single tuft of white fur remained, caught on a bamboo stalk. He bowed to the clearing. "Thank you," he whispered once more, his voice steady now. The evening wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of foxglove. Chapter 7: The Old Calligrapher. By dawn, Akihiro reached the outskirts of a small village nestled against the bamboo grove. Its houses were quiet, smoke just beginning to rise from a few chimneys. He wandered until he found a small workshop where the sliding doors stood open. Inside, an old man sat at a low desk, brush in hand. Sheets of rice paper lay around him, filled with bold strokes of ink kanji so fluid they seemed alive. The calligrapher did not look up as Akihiro entered. Instead, he continued his work, dipping the brush into ink, lifting it, and drawing a single stroke across the page. Only when he set the brush down did he speak. "You carry the silence of the bamboo," the old man said without turning. "Why have you come?" Akihiro bowed. "I do not know. Perhaps because I am searching." The calligrapher chuckled softly. "All who enter here are searching. Sit." Akihiro obeyed, kneeling on the floor. The old man handed him a brush. Its weight felt strange, heavier than it appeared. "Write," the calligrapher said simply. Akihiro hesitated. "What should I write?" "Anything. The brush will reveal what you hold." Akihiro dipped the brush into ink, then touched it to paper. His hand shook, the line uneven, but he continued. Without thought, he drew bamboo stalks crooked, wavering, but reaching upward. The old man studied the strokes. "You press too hard. You wish to control the line. But ink is like wind, it flows where it must. You must follow, not command." He took the brush and, with a single movement, drew a bamboo stalk so fluid and alive it seemed to sway upon the page. "See? It is not in the hand, but in the breath. If your breath is calm, the brush is calm. If your breath wavers, the line wavers." Akihiro felt heat rise in his chest. He had always believed strength lay in control, in effort. But here, effort only broke the flow. He bowed deeply. "Please teach me." The old calligrapher smiled faintly. The bamboo has already begun. I will only remind you how to listen. And so, as the morning light entered the workshop, Akihiro began to learn not of words, but of strokes, breath, and silence. Chapter 8 Storm over the bamboo. The sky darkened without warning. By the time Akihiro left the calligrapher's workshop, clouds had gathered thick and low above the mountains. The air pressed heavy, still, and charged with a strange tension. He walked back toward the grove, clutching the smooth stone the monk had given him. The bamboo swayed uneasily, their whispers sharper than before. A distant rumble rolled across the hills. Then the storm came. The wind roared, tearing through the bamboo with a fury unlike the gentle evening breeze he had come to know. Stalks bowed nearly to the ground, their creaks and groans like cries of pain. Rain fell in sudden sheets, drenching him to the bone. Akihiro stumbled, gripping one of the stalks for balance. It bent low, nearly sweeping him off his feet, but it did not break. Through the chaos, he remembered his grandfather's words: the oak resists and breaks. The bamboo bows and survives. He forced himself to breathe with the rhythm of the wind, lowering his body, letting the storm move past him rather than fight against it. The rain struck his face, but he did not turn away. Instead, he allowed himself to be carried by the storm's force, bending with it as the bamboo did. Through the downpour, a vision flashed before his eyes: the fox's glowing gaze, the monk's calm stream, the calligrapher's flowing brush. All of them echoed the same truth: to endure was not to resist, but to yield with strength. The storm raged on, yet Akihiro no longer felt fear. He let the wind push him, let the rain wash over him, until he was no longer apart from the storm but within it. He swayed as the bamboo swayed, his breath steady even as the world roared. And then, as suddenly as it began, the storm broke. The rain softened, the thunder moved away, and the bamboo rose once more, dripping but unbroken. Akihiro sank to his knees, soaked and trembling, yet smiling. He bowed low to the grove, whispering through the rain, "Teach me to bend, but not break." Chapter 9 The Stillness After Rain. The storm left the grove glistening. Droplets clung to every leaf, every stalk, each catching the pale light of dawn. The air smelled of wet earth and fresh life. Akihiro walked slowly, his sandals squelching against the softened ground. The bamboo no longer groaned, they stood quietly, rising tall once more. A deep stillness settled, the kind that only followed great noise. He paused by the same stream where he had met the monk. The water, once turbulent, now ran smooth, carrying leaves and petals down its length. He crouched low, cupping the cool water in his hands, and drank deeply. It tasted fresher than before, as though the storm had cleansed it. Sitting by the bank, he remembered the calligrapher's lesson: breath flows like ink, like wind. He held the stone the monk had given him and noticed how his own reflection in the water had changed. His face looked weary, yes, but steadier, calmer. The cicadas had fallen silent, their song replaced by the drip of water from bamboo leaves. A bird called once, softly, and then quieted again. The world was hushed, as though holding its breath. Akihiro closed his eyes and allowed the silence to fill him. He had once thought silence was emptiness, but now he felt its fullness. It was not the absence of sound, but the presence of balance. In that stillness, he sensed the garden of his own heart. A space where storms might come, but where stillness always returned. When he opened his eyes, the first rays of sunlight pierced the canopy, scattering into jewels across the droplets. The bamboo swayed gently in the morning wind, not in defiance of the storm, but in harmony with what had passed. Akihiro stood, his clothes still damp, but his spirit lighter. He bowed to the stream, then to the bamboo, and continued along the path. Each step was quieter now, but also stronger. Chapter 10 Ink and Breath. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered. When Akihiro returned to the village, the old calligrapher was already awake, seated at his desk with brush in hand. The windows of the workshop were open, letting in the cool fragrance of rain-washed earth. "You walked through the storm," the calligrapher said without looking up. His voice was calm, but Akihiro heard the weight in it. "Yes," Akihiro answered, bowing low. "And I did not break." The old man finally looked up, eyes narrowing as if studying him for the first time. Then, with a faint smile, he motioned to the cushion beside him. "Sit. Today you will write not with your hand, but with your breath." Akihiro knelt, brush in hand. He closed his eyes. The calligrapher's voice came, steady and soft. "Do not force the line. Do not chase it. Inhale, and when you exhale, let the brush move. The ink must flow as breath flows without hesitation." Akihiro breathed, steady and deep, and lowered the brush. The stroke came slowly at first, hesitant, but then it curved naturally, as if the paper itself guided it. He felt the same rhythm that had carried him through the storm, the same bending, the same yielding strength. When he lifted the brush, the old man studied the line. "Better," he said. "The bamboo sways in you." Hours passed in silence, broken only by the sound of brush against paper. Akihiro's strokes grew steadier, freer. He was no longer trying to control the ink. He was letting it breathe. Finally, the calligrapher set down his brush. "Remember, this ink is not only a mark, but emptiness. The white space is as alive as the black. The pause is as important as the breath. Without silence, no music; without space, no line." Akihiro bowed deeply, his heart swelling with gratitude. The calligrapher looked at him one last time, then returned to his work, dismissing him without words. As Akihiro stepped outside, the sun was rising fully, glinting on the wet leaves. He carried no paper, no brush, yet every breath felt like calligraphy written upon the world itself. Chapter 11 The Pilgrim's Bridge. The path led Akihiro away from the village, deeper into the valley. After several hours of walking, he came upon an old wooden bridge arching over a rushing river. Its planks were worn, its railings wrapped with moss and lichen. Yet the structure held firm, as though countless pilgrims had walked it before him. He placed his foot on the first plank, and the wood groaned softly. The river below foamed white, carrying branches and leaves downstream. He paused, hand resting on the railing, and breathed deeply. Halfway across, he stopped. The water roared beneath, drowning all other sound. The spray rose in bursts, cooling his face. For a moment, he felt the pull of fear, the sense that if he faltered, he would be swept away like the branches below. But then he recalled the calligrapher's words: without silence, no music; without space, no line. He realized the bridge itself was a stroke upon the valley, drawn not by hand but by generations of need and faith. And he, walking it now, was part of that line. He closed his eyes, listening not only to the roar of water but to the silence between its surges. In that silence, he heard the whisper of bamboo, the fox's quiet gaze, the monk's stream, the stillness after rain. He walked the rest of the bridge slowly, each step in rhythm with his breath. When he reached the far side, he turned and bowed deeply toward the bridge. "You carry not only me, but every pilgrim who has walked before," he murmured. The river roared on, indifferent yet eternal. The bridge creaked but did not falter. As he resumed his journey, Akihiro felt the weight of countless unseen companions walking with him, not only the fox, the monk, the calligrapher, but all who had bowed before bamboo, lanterns, storms, and silence. He was no longer a solitary traveler. He was part of a path much older, much wider than himself. Chapter 12: The Temple Beyond the Pines. After crossing the Pilgrim's Bridge, the path wound upward into a grove of tall pines. Their scent was sharp and clean, carrying a resinous sweetness that reminded Akihiro of winter nights long ago. The ground here was softer, carpeted with fallen needles that muted his footsteps until the world seemed padded, hushed. At the top of the slope, he saw it a small temple, weathered yet steadfast, its wooden beams darkened by centuries of rain and sun. The gate stood open, though no one appeared to guard it. Lanterns hung unlit along the eaves, swaying gently in the morning breeze. Akihiro stepped through the gate. The courtyard was simple: a stone path, a moss-covered well, and a single cherry tree whose blossoms had long since fallen. Yet despite its modesty, the place breathed a sacred calm. He bowed before the temple's entrance, then slid open the door. Inside, the faint smell of incense lingered. At the altar sat no golden statue, but instead a plain wooden carving of a seated figure, face serene, eyes closed in eternal meditation. A monk appeared from the shadows, his robes the color of ash. He was old, his back bent, but his gaze was keen. "You have walked far," the monk said. "Yes," Akihiro replied, bowing deeply. "And I have been guided." The monk studied him for a long moment, then motioned for him to kneel. Akihiro obeyed, settling onto the tatami floor. The silence of the temple was vast, larger than any silence he had known. Even the pine wind seemed reluctant to enter here. "Why have you come?" the monk asked finally. Akihiro hesitated, then spoke truthfully. "I do not know. I only follow where the path leads." The monk smiled faintly. "Then you walk as all pilgrims must. Not for destination, but for becoming." They sat together in silence. Akihiro's breath slowed, his thoughts quieted. In that stillness, the temple seemed less a building than a reflection of his own heart, worn, weathered, yet standing, waiting. When he finally rose to leave, the monk gave him nothing, not even a word. Yet Akihiro carried away something unseen, the weightless blessing of silence itself. Chapter 13: A Conversation with Silence. The path beyond the temple descended into a hollow where no wind stirred. The bamboo here grew sparse, giving way to stones and wild grasses. Akihiro walked slowly, his sandals scraping softly against the earth. At first, he thought the silence was ordinary. But as he moved deeper, he realized it was not the absence of sound but a presence so complete it pressed upon him. Even the birds did not sing here. He stopped, uncertain. His own breath sounded loud in his ears, as though the silence were listening. Tentatively, he whispered, "Are you here?" There was no reply, yet the silence seemed to thicken, embracing his words, swallowing them whole. He sat upon a stone, closing his eyes. Memories drifted to him, his grandfather's voice teaching him the patience of bamboo, the fox's amber eyes, the calligrapher's brushstrokes, the monk's stream. Each memory spoke not with words, but with the pauses between them. Slowly, Akihiro realized he was not speaking to silence. He was speaking with it. The silence was not void, but a teacher. It asked him to listen not for answers, but for the spaces where answers might someday dwell. Hours passed. Or perhaps moments. Time lost its weight. When at last he opened his eyes, he felt lighter, as though he had shed something he could not name. He stood and bowed to the hollow. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice steady now. As he resumed walking, a breeze stirred at last, rustling the grass. The silence did not vanish, it walked with him, like a companion who needed no words. Chapter 14: The Sound of the Shakuhachi. As Akihiro continued his journey, the path narrowed and the bamboo grew taller, their stalks dense enough to block most of the afternoon light. Somewhere ahead, he heard a sound, soft, breathy, and haunting. It was a shakuhachi flute, its tone rising and falling like wind over the mountains. The music drew him onward. He followed the sound until he reached a small clearing, where an elderly man sat cross-legged on a flat stone, shakuhachi in hand. His eyes were closed, yet each note seemed to ripple through the bamboo around him. Akihiro knelt respectfully, listening. Each tone carried the breath of the player and the grove itself. It spoke of storms weathered, of shadows embraced, of rain and stillness. The music was not cheerful nor mournful, it simply was, as the wind simply is. The musician paused, then opened his eyes. "You walk with much on your heart," he said. "And yet your steps are steady. Why do you listen to the bamboo, to the wind, to the world around you?" Akihiro bowed. "I am learning," he said. "Learning how to move with it, rather than against it." The shakuhachi player nodded. "Good. Breath is life. Each note comes not from your hands, but from your breath and your being. Walk, breathe, and you will understand." Akihiro closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and let the wind fill him. He could hear the bamboo sway in harmony with the shakuhachi's song. For the first time, he felt the line between himself and the grove blur. He was not a visitor, nor an observer, he was part of the music, part of the rhythm of the evening wind. When he rose to leave, the musician nodded silently. The shakuhachi's song faded behind him, yet its presence lingered within, like a lantern quietly glowing in his chest. Chapter 15 Beneath the Full Moon. That night, Akihiro arrived at a small plateau overlooking the valley below. The moon rose in the sky, full and luminous, bathing the landscape in silver light. Bamboo leaves shimmered, reflecting the moon like 1,000 tiny mirrors. He sat at the edge of the plateau, legs dangling over the slope, and gazed at the glowing world beneath. The villages looked peaceful, the rivers winding like ribbons of light, and the distant mountains stood as silent guardians. A gentle wind stirred the bamboo around him. Its whisper seemed to carry words he could almost understand, a song of continuity, of patience, of quiet strength. He remembered everything: the fox, the monk, the calligrapher, the storm, the temple, the silence, the shakuhachi. Each encounter had been a lesson, yet none offered answers outright. Instead, they had shown him how to perceive, how to breathe, how to walk in harmony with the world. Akihiro closed his eyes beneath the moon. He felt the rhythm of the grove, of the valley, of his own heart. The lanterns of the ridge, the stars above, and the moonlight all joined together. He realized the path he had walked was not merely a trail through bamboo and villages, it was a path within himself. He whispered to the night, "I see now the world is not something to conquer, but to move with. To bend, to sway, to listen, to breathe." The moonlight shimmered across the bamboo, the wind carried its soft rustle, and for the first time, Akihiro felt the completeness of his journey so far. He stayed beneath the full moon until sleep claimed him, the grove swaying gently around him, carrying him into dreams of lanterns, wind, and endless bamboo. Chapter 16 The Hidden Waterfall. After the night beneath the full moon, Akihiro awoke to the soft murmur of wind through bamboo. He resumed his journey, following a narrow trail that wound deeper into the forested hills. The path twisted through shaded hollows, over mossy stones, and alongside quiet rivulets. Eventually, he heard it, a distant roar, muffled yet persistent. Curiosity urged him forward until the trees parted, revealing a hidden waterfall. Water tumbled down a cliff into a crystal pool below, sending mist into the air. Rainbows formed briefly where the sunlight struck the spray. Akihiro approached the edge of the pool, mesmerized. The waterfall's sound was powerful yet gentle, constant yet ever-changing, like life itself. He knelt by the water, letting the cool mist of its surface touch his face. He recalled the storm over the bamboo, the lesson of bending without breaking. This waterfall was different, yet its message was the same. No matter how forceful the world's flow, it carved its path with patience, persistence, and grace. He filled his hands with water and let it trickle through his fingers, watching the droplets catch the light. In that simple act, he felt a kinship with all things that moved yet remained, that shaped the world while remaining themselves. Rising, Akihiro bowed to the waterfall. "Thank you," he whispered, understanding at last that guidance was everywhere, often hidden, waiting for those who chose to notice. Chapter 17 Lessons from the Fox. As he retraced his steps from the waterfall, Akihiro noticed the familiar presence again, the fox. It appeared silently among the bamboo, amber eyes gleaming. This time, it did not simply guide him, it watched, its gaze steady and knowing. Akihiro crouched slowly, lowering himself to meet the fox's eyes. "I remember your first guidance," he said softly. "You led me to see what I could not on my own." The fox tilted its head, then padded forward, pausing as if to invite him to follow. They walked together in silence, the bamboo swaying around them. The fox led him to a small grove of young bamboo. Here, the stalks were thin and flexible, swaying wildly in the wind, yet standing firm. The fox stopped and looked at Akihiro, as though signaling him to observe. He watched, noticing how the young bamboo bent with gusts, never resisting, always returning upright. The lesson was clear: strength was not in rigidity, but in adaptability. The fox had led him to this revelation not by speaking, but by presence. Akihiro knelt, letting the understanding seep into him. "Bend like bamboo," he murmured. "Yield, endure, yet remain steadfast." The fox lingered for a moment, then disappeared silently into the grove. Akihiro watched until it was gone, feeling both loss and gratitude. Every encounter had been a thread woven into the fabric of his journey, and the fox, ever elusive, remained a guide in spirit if not in form. He rose and continued down the path, the whisper of bamboo around him and the lessons of the fox within him, guiding every step. Chapter 18 Echoes of the Lanterns. Akihiro emerged from the grove at dusk, the sky painted in streaks of violet and gold. Far below, in the valley, he saw a familiar sight: the lanterns along the ridge he had once traversed, now glowing faintly in the gathering night. Their light shimmered like a river of fireflies, soft yet unwavering. He descended toward them, moving slowly, letting the glow guide his steps. Each lantern he passed seemed to respond to his presence, flickering gently, as if acknowledging him. The memory of the ridge, the fox, and the monks came to him all at once, threading together into a single pattern. He paused before one lantern and knelt. The flame danced in the evening wind, fragile yet persistent. Akihiro understood that the lanterns were not merely objects, they were symbols of care, patience, and attention. They were markers of those who had walked before him, and guides for those who would walk after. As he rose, a breeze carried faint voices, whispers of gratitude and hope, of travelers who had found solace along this path. Akihiro realized that the lantern's glow was not his alone, nor the grove's alone. It belonged to everyone who sought harmony with the world. He continued along the ridge, feeling the echo of countless footsteps, countless hearts. The lanterns swayed in the wind, their reflections dancing on his wet eyes. And in that light, Akihiro felt connected not only to the bamboo, the wind, and the fox, but to the enduring spirit of all who had ever walked this quiet path. Chapter 19: The Pilgrimage Home. As dawn approached, Akihiro left the ridge and began the final stretch of his journey, descending toward his village. The path was familiar now, yet each step felt alive, each stone and bamboo stalk resonating with memory. He passed the stream where he had met the monk, kneeling to touch the water once more. It flowed as before, calm and steady, a silent witness to all who traveled its banks. He thought of the calligrapher, the fox, the shakuhachi player, the temple, and the waterfall. Each had left a mark upon him, shaping him as surely as the river shaped its stones. Arriving at the edge of the village, Akihiro paused. Smoke rose from the chimneys, the scent of cooking mingled with the morning air, and the villagers moved about quietly. He felt both a stranger and a son returned, different from the boy who had left, yet the same in heart. He walked slowly through familiar streets, bowing to those he passed. Each nod, each smile, seemed to carry a shared recognition, an unspoken understanding. He had returned, but the journey had not ended, it had transformed him. At his home, he knelt by the threshold and set the stone from the monk upon the floor. He whispered a quiet vow to live with the lessons of bamboo, wind, water, and light, to move with the world. Rather than against it, to carry the calm within him even amidst life's storms. The sun rose higher, spilling gold across rooftops and fields. Akihiro rose, shoulders straight, eyes bright. He felt the rhythm of the grove, the echo of the lanterns, the flow of breath and ink within him. The journey home was complete, yet the path, the understanding, the harmony would continue as long as he lived. Chapter 20: The Last Lantern. Evening fell, soft and golden, as Akihiro returned to the edge of the grove where his journey had begun. The bamboo swayed gently in the wind, familiar yet transformed in his eyes. Along the narrow path, he noticed a lantern he had never seen before. Its light was faint, almost hesitant, yet warm and unwavering. He approached and knelt. The flame flickered in rhythm with the evening wind, and for a moment, he felt as if all his experiences, the fox, the monk, the calligrapher, the waterfall, the temple, the ridge of lanterns were reflected in its glow. Akihiro understood then that this lantern was not only a guide, but a witness, a keeper of all that he had learned. He bowed deeply. "Thank you," he whispered, the words carrying both gratitude and recognition of the path he had walked. The wind rose briefly, carrying the sound of rustling bamboo leaves. The lantern swayed, casting long shadows along the path. Akihiro rose, feeling a serene strength within him. He had reached the end of his outward journey. Yet the lantern reminded him that the path was endless inward, in every breath, every step, every moment of awareness. He turned and walked slowly back toward the village, the lantern's glow fading gently behind him, yet leaving a lasting warmth in his heart. Epilogue. Evening wind, eternal grove. Years later, Akihiro would walk the grove not as a seeker, but as one who understood its whispers. The bamboo swayed as it always had, the wind sang through the stalks, the streams flowed patiently, and the lanterns glowed at dusk. He remembered the fox, whose guidance had taught him observation and adaptability. He remembered the monk, whose stream had taught him patience. He remembered the calligrapher, whose ink had taught him breath and presence. He remembered the storm, the temple, the waterfall, and the silent conversation with the hollow of the grove. Akihiro walked slowly, feeling the rhythm of the bamboo in his own steps. He carried the lessons in his heart, sharing them in small gestures with those who sought guidance, not with words alone, but with presence, calm, and understanding. As evening came and the wind moved through the grove, he paused and looked toward the horizon. The last lantern he had seen years before seemed to glow faintly in the distance. Though he knew it was not the lantern itself, but the light that had entered his own being. The bamboo swayed endlessly, the wind whispered, and Akihiro understood the path as eternal, as is the harmony of all living things. Life, like the grove, bends and sways, rises and falls, yet endures ever flowing, ever present, ever whole. And in that eternal grove, he walked on, carrying the peace he had found, the lanterns of all his teachers lighting the way forward. The silent path between two streams. Prologue. A whisper in the pines. The village of Mizunara lay hidden between two gentle streams, their voices soft yet constant, like breath drawn in and out by the earth itself. To the east flowed the river Asahi, its waters clear and cool, carrying mountain snow toward distant fields. To the west moved the river Yuru, darker, slower, a mirror for the moon. Between them stretched a narrow path of moss and stone, a path that had seen countless footsteps yet never hurried, a path that invited silence. Travelers spoke of Mizunara as if it were a dream one might half remember upon waking. Wooden houses leaned beneath their thatched roofs. Lanterns hung from eaves swaying with evening breezes, and pines lined the edges of the path. whispering to each other in tones no one could fully understand. Time in Mizunara did not move in a straight line, it lingered like incense in the air, circling gently, returning always to its beginning. It was here, in the soft hush between two streams, that a wanderer would arrive, a person carrying both questions and fatigue. And here, too, a journey of listening rather than striving would begin. Chapter 1: Arrival at Dusk. The train mooned through the valley with the patience of a heron drifting along the water's edge. Each curve revealed another hillside, another glimpse of bamboo, another cluster of tiled rooftops half hidden by trees. The wanderer, a traveler known to us only as you sat near the window, cheek resting against cool glass, eyes slowly heavy from the rhythm of the rails. Outside, dusk gathered like indigo ink spreading across parchment. Villages grew quieter, fields shimmered faintly with fireflies. In the distance, the last arc of sun brushed the peaks of the mountains before bowing away. The train sighed to a stop at Mizunara Station, a small wooden platform lit by a single lantern. The conductor gave a polite nod, and you stepped down into the cool evening air. Crickets sang their endless chorus. Somewhere close, water murmured over stones. There were no crowds, no bustling station shops. Only a wooden sign hand painted with the kanji for Mizunara. Beyond it, the path stretched ahead, framed by tall pines that whispered with dusk wind. You felt no need to hurry. In fact, it seemed impossible to hurry here. Each step carried its own quietness, as if the earth asked you to walk gently. To your left, faint and silver in the fading light, flowed the river Asahi, lively with small ripples and the laughter of water over stone. To your right, slower, darker, reflecting the first stars, moved the river Yuru. Between them lay the narrow path, soft with moss. You walked, lantern light from the station dimming behind you, until the sound of the streams became your guide. Somewhere ahead waited the village inn, a place where travelers could rest, though you did not yet know what form that rest would take. The air carried scents of cedar and smoke. Frogs began their evening songs in the reeds. Fireflies traced gentle arcs, as if guiding you toward sleep itself. Soon, you reached the inn, a wooden building with sliding doors, paper lanterns glowing softly at its entrance. An elderly woman, her hair silver as river mist, greeted you with a bow. Her voice was kind but quiet, like the hush of folded silk. "Welcome," she said. "You must be tired from your journey. Please, come in. The night is gentle here." And so you entered, leaving behind the world of timetables and trains, and stepping into a place where silence was not emptiness, but fullness. Tatami mats cushioned your feet. A kettle whispered on the hearth. Somewhere deeper in the house, a wind chime rang once, as if acknowledging your arrival. The innkeeper showed you to a small room facing the garden. Beyond the sliding door, stones glistened with dew. A lantern lit the branches of a plum tree, and the streams could still be heard. one on each side, their voices like two companions conversing across time. You lie down upon the futon prepared for you, listening. The journey had ended, but another had begun, a journey inward, along the silent path between two streams. And as your eyes grew heavy, the streams carried you into dreams. Chapter 2: The Garden of Stillness. Morning light arrived softly, as though it had walked barefoot through the night. When you slid open the shoji, the garden outside was bathed in pale gold. A plum blossom trembled with dew, and a pair of sparrows darted between bamboo stalks, wings whispering. The inn was quiet, its wooden beams warm with sun, its corridors holding the faint scent of cedar. You stepped into the garden, where flat stones formed a path over moss. The air was cool and full of silence, not the silence of emptiness but of presence. The streams on either side spoke again, Asahi with playful laughter, Yuru with calm depth. Their voices intertwined across the village like two lines of an old song. An old gardener tended to the moss with careful hands, trimming just enough to let it breathe. He looked up, his eyes reflecting the stillness of the place. "Here," he said gently, "nothing is hurried. Even the stones rest." You knelt beside the pond, watching koi drift lazily, orange and white shapes moving as though they dreamed. A breeze carried the fragrance of tea leaves drying somewhere nearby. Time, in Mizunara, seemed to stretch thin, like rice paper held to the light. The garden was not only outside but also inside you, opening quietly, petal by petal. Chapter 3: The Bridge of Lanterns. That evening, the innkeeper invited you to walk toward the heart of the village. Lanterns were being hung along the small wooden bridge that crossed the river Asahi. Children carried them carefully, their faces glowing with reflected light. The bridge itself was old, polished smooth by years of footsteps, but tonight it shone like a ribbon of fireflies laid gently across the water. The Asahi flowed beneath, alive with the lantern's reflections, stars above, and stars below. Villagers gathered, but not with noise or hurry. They stood as though participating in a shared breath. Each lantern carried a prayer for health, for safe harvest, for peace. The river accepted them all with grace, carrying each light downstream, where it would join the Yuru and vanish into the night. The innkeeper placed a lantern in your hands. Its paper sides glowed softly, painted with a plum blossom in careful strokes. "Release it," she whispered, "and let the river carry what you no longer need." You knelt at the edge of the bridge, placed the lantern upon the water, and watched as it drifted away, gently turning, joining countless others. For a moment, you felt yourself floating to not body, not thought, only light carried by water. The villagers began to hum a low song, one that had no words but only tones, like wind in pine needles. You listened, and the world inside you grew still, the streams on both sides carrying you deeper into rest. Chapter 4: Tea Beneath the Eaves. The following afternoon, rain arrived not in sudden torrents, but in fine threads, weaving silver lines across the air. The inn grew hushed, as though leaning closer to listen. Tatami absorbed the sound, and the roof tiles released a soft rhythm like a distant drum. The innkeeper led you to a low veranda facing the garden. She placed before you a small tray, a clay teapot, a single cup, and leaves so green they seemed alive even before the water touched them. Steam curled upward, carrying with it the scent of fresh earth and mountain mist. The tea was poured slowly, as though each drop were part of a ceremony older than memory. You lifted the cup. Its warmth filled your palms, then spread through your body like a gentle tide. The flavor was quiet, both grassy and sweet, leaving a coolness on the tongue as if it carried echoes of the very streams outside. Rain tapped against the plum blossoms, and each drop released a brighter fragrance. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime rang once, then once again, a voice within the silence. The innkeeper spoke softly. Tea reminds us nothing need be rushed. Even water waits until it is ready to boil, and leaves release their gift only when the time is right. You sipped, and the world slowed further. The streams sang beyond the rain, and the path between them seemed to open, unseen, inside your chest. Chapter 5: The Temple on the Hill. The rain passed by morning, leaving the air washed clear, the sky the pale blue of porcelain. Villagers spoke of a small temple on the hill above Mizunara, a place where one could hear not only the streams but also the silence between their voices. You walked the stone steps slowly, moss soft beneath your sandals. The path climbed through cedars, their trunks straight as pillars, their tops vanishing into light. A faint scent of incense drifted down, guiding you upward. At the summit stood the temple, wooden beams darkened with age, roof curved like the wings of a resting bird. No crowd waited, no sound of chanting filled the air, only a single monk sweeping fallen needles from the path. He bowed, wordless, and gestured for you to enter. Inside, the hall was dim, lit by a single candle. Tatami smelled faintly of straw, and the floor creaked gently beneath each step. You knelt before a simple altar where a small bronze bell rested. At the monk's nod, you struck it once. The sound rose like a drop of water rippling outward, filling the hall, then fading into stillness so deep it seemed endless. In that silence, you heard the streams again, not with your ears, but somewhere deeper. Asahi's laughter, Yuru's calm, two voices weaving through your breath. The monk spoke, his tone as slow as the falling of leaves. The streams remind us joy and stillness walk together. To hear both is to walk the true path. You remained there, breathing, until even your thoughts grew quiet, like lanterns extinguished one by one. Chapter 6: The Call of the Bamboo Grove. One afternoon, the innkeeper suggested you walk farther along the path, past where the two streams nearly touched before parting again. There, she said, grew a bamboo grove that never hurried, even in the strongest winds. You followed the path until it narrowed into soil softened by countless seasons. Soon, you heard it, the hollow knocking of bamboo culms brushing against one another, a music older than words. The grove welcomed you with tall, green pillars swaying gently overhead. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, falling in shifting patterns like ripples of water. Each breath of wind brought a chorus, a wooden murmur, soft yet resonant, as though the forest itself were exhaling. You paused among them, letting the rhythm enter your chest. Step by step, the world beyond the grove fell away. No memory of trains, no weight of days, only the sound of bamboo speaking to bamboo. Reminding you that strength could also be gentle, and that standing tall required nothing more than yielding to the wind. Somewhere within, a small shrine rested, its roof covered in moss. A white ribbon fluttered from a branch above it, carrying prayers written by hands long gone. You closed your eyes, listening until silence itself became a companion. When you left, the grove continued to sing, its voice carrying with you like an unseen lantern burning softly inside. Chapter 7, Evening by the Uru River. That night, you walked again, this time toward the slower of the two streams, the Uru. Moonlight lay across its surface, turning the dark water silver. The air smelled of river stones, cool and clean. Fishermen sat quietly on the bank, lines resting in the water, their lanterns glowing faintly beside them. They did not speak much, only nodded in greeting, as though silence were the truest conversation. You sat upon a smooth rock, the river lapping at its base. The Uru flowed steadily, its surface unbroken except for the widening rings where fish rose briefly before vanishing again. A breeze carried the scent of wildflowers, and the night deepened with crickets' songs. Stars above mirrored the lanterns on the water, as if the river stretched upward into the sky. Closing your eyes, you listened. The Uru did not laugh like the Asahi, it whispered instead, a voice so low it felt woven into your breath. Each moment stretched, elongated, until time itself seemed to drift like the river, slow and without end. You felt your body grow heavy, as though settling into the earth itself. The world narrowed to water, moonlight, and the soft hum of night. And there, by the river Uru, you began to understand sometimes rest is not found in stillness alone, but in surrendering to the flow that has always been moving, even before you arrived. Chapter 8, The Storyteller's Hearth. The following evening, villagers gathered at a small house near the center of Mizunara. Smoke rose gently from its chimney, and the scent of cedar firewood lingered in the cool night. You were invited inside, where a circle of cushions had been laid around a low hearth. An elderly man with eyes bright as river stones sat at the center. His hands were weathered, his voice slow but steady, carrying both warmth and patience. He was known as the storyteller. Children leaned forward, eyes wide, while the adults listened with the stillness of trees. The storyteller began not with words, but with silence, as though allowing the flames to speak first. Then he told of the streams, how long ago they were born from the same mountain spring. one rushing eagerly toward the dawn, the other gliding patiently into night. They parted, yet never lost their bond, flowing always in parallel, each carrying the other in memory. His tail wandered like water, not hurried, not seeking an end, but circling gently through images of foxes, cranes, and the sound of rain on old temple roofs. You listened, lulled by the rhythm of his voice and the fire's crackle. The story was less about events than about spaces between them, a reminder that sometimes the truest meaning rests in pauses, like the breath between heartbeats. When he finished, the room remained quiet, as if no one wished to break the spell. Only the fire continued to whisper, sending sparks upward like fleeting stars. Chapter 9: The Moonlit Fields. Later that night, unable to sleep, you stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky vast, and the moon full, silvering the village and its fields. Beyond the houses stretched rice paddies, their water surfaces like mirrors, reflecting both moon and stars. The stalks swayed lightly, as though breathing with the earth. You walked along a narrow ridge dividing the paddies, your footsteps soft, the world wide and hushed. Frogs sang in a steady chorus, joined by the rustle of reeds. Fireflies rose here and there, tiny lanterns wandering without destination. At the far edge of the fields stood a lone scarecrow, arms outstretched. In the moonlight, it appeared almost alive, watching over both crops and dreams. You bowed slightly as you passed, a silent gesture of respect. Standing still in the middle of the fields, you felt as though the world had expanded infinitely, yet also folded inward. The Asahi's laughter, the Yuru's calm, the voices of frogs and wind, all of it blended into one sound, one breath. The moon seemed close enough to touch. Its light rested on your shoulders like a soft cloth, carrying weight yet also comfort. There, in the moonlit fields, you realized sleep was not something to chase. It was something already waiting, surrounding you like the quiet water in the paddies, reflecting a sky that had no end. Chapter 10: The Bell of Dawn. The night yielded slowly to morning. Mist clung to the rooftops, drifting like pale silk across the village. From the hilltop temple, a single bell rang, its tone low and deep, carrying across fields and streams. You awoke to its sound. It was not abrupt but gentle, as though the bell wished not to stir you from sleep but to fold your dream into the waking world. Each echo spread outward, touching pines, water, and sky, before fading into silence that seemed even deeper than before. Drawn by the resonance, you climbed the hill once more. The steps were damp with dew, stones glistening faintly. At the top, the monk stood quietly, both hands resting on the broom he carried. He greeted you with a nod, then gestured toward the bell. It was large, cast from bronze centuries ago, its surface etched with patterns of waves and clouds. The monk struck it again, and the sound swelled round, endless, as if it carried the breath of mountains. You stood with eyes closed, letting the vibration move through you. The bell did not merely sound, it lingered, like the streams themselves, flowing without hurry. In that moment, dawn seemed less like a beginning and more like a continuation, another step along the silent path you were only beginning to see. Chapter 11: The Market of Quiet Voices. Later that morning, the village came alive in its own soft way. Along the main street, stalls were set beneath paper awnings, offering vegetables, woven baskets, and small carvings of wood and stone. The market did not clamor with noise as in the cities. Here, voices were low, exchanges marked by bows and smiles. Children carried bundles of herbs, elders sat quietly behind their goods, hands folded patiently. You wandered between stalls. A woman sold persimmons, their orange skins glowing like small suns. She placed 2 coins in your hands and would not accept coins, only a bow in return. A craftsman displayed bamboo flutes, their tones airy as the wind passing through leaves. At the far end of the market, a potter shaped clay on a wheel. His hands moved slowly, steady as flowing water. He glanced up briefly, his eyes calm, then returned to his work, as if the act of shaping clay was itself a form of meditation. The air carried scents of roasted chestnuts and fresh miso. Everywhere, you felt the stream's presence, as though their balance guided even the simplest trade. Nothing rushed, nothing pressed. The market was not only for buying and selling but for remembering that life, too, could be lived in quiet voices. Carrying your small basket of gifts, you returned along the path, the market's hush still inside you, like a soft echo of the streams. Chapter 12: The Hidden Waterfall. One afternoon, a child from the village pointed toward the forested slope beyond the fields. "There is a waterfall," she said, "but it hides unless you listen carefully." Curious, you followed a narrow trail that wound upward through cedars and maples. The air cooled as you climbed, shadows growing deeper, birds flitted above, their wings quick flashes of light. At first, there was no sound but the crunch of soil beneath your steps. Then, faintly, a murmur rose, distant, steady, like a voice calling softly from behind a veil. The path curved, and suddenly you saw it, a waterfall descending from a dark cliff, ribbons of silver tumbling into a pool of green. Mist rose where water met stone, drifting outward to kiss your face. Moss covered every surface, shining with droplets like scattered gems. The sound was not loud, but encompassing, filling every space without being intrusive. You sat upon a rock, letting the rhythm of falling water move through you. It seemed both endless and new, every drop unique, yet part of the same eternal flow. Closing your eyes, you imagined the 2 streams below, Asahi and Uru, born of countless such falls, carrying always the mountain's gift. And you felt that you too were being carried by time, by breath, by something larger than yourself, moving gently onward. Chapter 13: The Paper Cranes. That evening, at the inn, the innkeeper placed a small bundle of washi paper before you. Its colors were soft pale blue, warm ivory, gentle pink, like shades of dawn and dusk. "Would you fold with us?" she asked. The children make cranes, each carrying a wish. You joined them in the common room, where lantern light glowed against wooden beams. The children's hands moved carefully, folding corners, creasing wings, shaping birds from squares of silence. Their laughter was quiet, more like murmurs of the stream than bursts of sound. You followed their motions, folding slowly, the paper crackling softly beneath your fingers. Each crease seemed to hold intention, each fold a breath. When at last your crane stood upon the tatami, its wings spread. As if ready to lift into the night, you felt something unspoken settle inside you, a small piece, fragile yet steady. The children gathered their cranes into baskets. Tomorrow, they said, the cranes would be placed upon the river, each carrying a wish downstream, where Asahi and Yuru might guide them to the sea. As you watched the small birds of paper rustle in the lamplight, you wondered perhaps wishes are not meant to be kept, but to be released like lanterns, like streams, like dreams themselves. Chapter 14 The Mountain Path. The morning sky was clear, a soft blue brushed with faint wisps of cloud. Villagers spoke of a trail leading higher into the mountains, where the two streams were said to draw closer together before vanishing into mist. You set out slowly, the earth damp with dew, leaves glistening as though polished by invisible hands. The path wound upward, shaded by tall cedars and maples beginning to hint at autumn. Birdsong accompanied your steps, weaving with the murmur of water hidden somewhere below. Each turn revealed a new view, a stretch of terraced fields, a cluster of wildflowers trembling with bees. A glimpse of the valley where Mizunara lay quiet between its two rivers. As you climbed, the air grew thinner, yet lighter too, filled with resin and stone. The stream's voices drifted faintly, Asahi quick and bright, Yuru low and steady. Their harmony seemed to follow you, even where their waters could not be seen. At a bend in the trail, you rested upon a fallen log. The silence around you was vast, yet not empty. It held the breath of countless seasons, of footsteps long forgotten. For a moment, you felt not like a traveler, but like part of the path itself, a stone, a leaf, a pause in the endless climb. Chapter 15 The Hermit's Hut. Deeper along the trail, tucked into a hollow of rock and pine, stood a small hut. Its roof was heavy with moss, its walls built of rough timber, smoke curling from a crooked chimney. An old hermit sat outside, tending a kettle balanced above a low fire. His hair was long, his robe patched, yet his eyes were clear, reflecting sky and stream alike. He looked up as you approached and smiled, gesturing for you to sit. Without words, he poured tea into a wooden cup and placed it in your hands. The warmth seeped into your skin, the fragrance of roasted leaves mingling with the mountain air. For a long time, you both sat in silence. The hermit seemed content to let the wind and birds speak instead. Only when the kettle sighed empty did he speak, his voice soft, like gravel touched by rain. "Everything flows," he said. "Streams, clouds, breath. To resist is to grow weary. To follow is to find rest." He returned to silence, eyes on the shifting smoke above the fire. You drank the last of the tea, its taste lingering like a memory, and felt that no further words were needed. When you rose to leave, the hermit bowed once, slowly, as though sealing a quiet pact between you. The trail continued upward, but the echo of his words followed, steady as the streams below. Chapter 16: The Cave of Echoes. The mountain path narrowed, stones slick with moss, until it reached the mouth of a small cave. From within came a faint hum, neither wind nor water, but something between. You stepped inside carefully. The air was cool, carrying the scent of damp stone. Droplets fell from the ceiling, each striking the floor with a hollow note that lingered longer than expected. As you walked deeper, the sound changed. Your footsteps, your breath, even the faint beating of your heart seemed to return to you, stretched and softened. The cave gave back not noise but memory, as though holding every sound that had ever passed through. At the center, a pool of clear water mirrored the dim light from the entrance. You knelt beside it, watching your reflection tremble with each drip. When you whispered a single word, the echo answered, not in repetition, but in transformation, as though the cave wished to remind you that nothing remains unchanged. Sitting in the silence that followed, you realized the streams outside were not alone. Countless hidden waters moved through the mountain, unseen yet present, their voices merging in secret harmony. When you left the cave, its echo stayed with you, like a gentle reminder that your own voice, too, belonged to something larger, endlessly returning. Chapter 17: The Festival of Shadows. By the time you returned to Mizunara, the village was preparing for an autumn festival. Paper lanterns hung from doorways, their glow soft against the deepening dusk. This was not a festival of noise or crowds, but of shadows. Villagers lit candles inside their homes, then placed them near windows, allowing silhouettes to play upon paper screens. Children giggled as their hands became birds, foxes, or dancing spirits. Elders traced slow patterns with fans, shadows rippling like waves. In the main square, a sheet of white cloth hung between two posts. Behind it, villagers performed old stories with nothing but their hands and bodies, shadows shifting and merging into familiar forms. Cranes flying, a fisherman casting his net, the streams themselves meeting in embrace before parting once more. You sat among them, the cool night air filled with laughter that never rose too loud. The shadows seemed alive, moving gently in rhythm with the flicker of flame, reminding everyone that light and dark were not enemies, but companions, each giving shape to the other. A child tugged at your sleeve and placed a small candle in your hands. You set it beside you, watching your own shadow stretch and sway upon the wall. For a moment, you were part of the story, part of the dance between flame and night. And as the festival wound down, the lanterns dimming one by one, you felt again the stream's presence, Asahi bright as flame, Yuru deep as shadow. Both alive, both necessary, both guiding you further along the silent path. Chapter 18 The Floating Bridge. The next morning, a delicate mist floated over the Asahi River, hiding its banks like a soft veil. Villagers spoke of a small wooden bridge further upstream, so light it seemed to float above the water. You followed the path, feeling the cool, damp air of the morning, the soft hum of insects in the reeds. The bridge appeared suddenly, its planks worn smooth by countless footsteps. It swayed gently as you stepped onto it, the river moving silently beneath. Asahi sparkled in the diffused sunlight, reflecting mist and leaves. The Yuru could be seen from afar, dark and slow, a companion hidden behind the rising bank. Standing on the bridge, you felt suspended between two worlds above the flowing water, between the streams, between dream and waking. Each step seemed to merge with the river's rhythm. The bridge was not merely a path but a place of pause, where one could breathe deeply and feel the currents of life beneath the feet. You closed your eyes, letting the movement of the water, the wind, and your own heartbeat all mingle in one quiet harmony. Time itself seemed to slow here, each moment folding gently into the next, like a lantern drifting silently along the river. Chapter 19 The Whispering Pines. After crossing the bridge, the path led into a grove of ancient pines. Their trunks were tall and straight, branches high above, whispering to each other in a language older than memory. You strolled, letting each breath align with the subtle sway of needles in the wind. The forest floor was soft with pine needles, cushioning each step, muffling all noise except the gentle creaking of the trees. A fallen pine lay across the path, its surface smooth and warm from sunlight. You paused, resting a hand on the bark. Somewhere within the grove, a bird sang not loudly, but precisely, a single note echoing and fading into the hush around you. The two streams were far below now, but you felt their presence everywhere. In the sway of branches, in the faint trickle of hidden waters, in the soft pattern of light on the forest floor. For a long while, you simply walked, eyes half closed, listening. The grove seemed to breathe along with you, matching your pace, your pause, your quiet curiosity. The wind in the pines carried a message that needed no words. Rest, observe, and let the world move without hurry. You realized then that the silent path between the streams was not just a place on a map, but a journey inward, a thread connecting water, tree, stone, and breath into one calm, unbroken flow. Chapter 20 The Sunset Terrace. By late afternoon, you reached a small terrace overlooking both streams. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting the valley in a golden haze. The Asahi sparkled, its waters dancing with the last rays of light. while the Yuru reflected a deeper, calmer glow, as if holding the memory of day within itself. Between them, the moss-covered path led onward, disappearing into the soft folds of the landscape. You sat on the edge of the terrace, legs dangling lightly, and watched the streams. Birds drifted across the sky in formation, their wings catching the sun in flashes of gold. A gentle wind brushed against your face, carrying the fragrance of pine and damp earth. No sound demanded your attention. The streams, the breeze, the occasional call of a distant bird all merged into a quiet symphony. You felt a profound stillness, a sense that every step taken to reach this moment had been part of a journey inward, as much as it had been along the path. For a long time, you simply watched, breathing with the rhythm of the streams, letting the sun's warmth and the gentle wind fill your body with calm. Chapter 21: The Lantern Path. As dusk approached, the village illuminated itself with lanterns. Their soft glow lined the streets and the mossy path between the two streams. You walked slowly, lantern in hand, feeling the subtle warmth of its paper sides. Shadows stretched and danced across the stones, mingling with the soft reflection of the rivers. Each step seemed measured, each breath in harmony with the quiet pulse of Mizunara. Villagers moved alongside you, silent and smiling, carrying their own lanterns. Children skipped lightly, their laughter gentle, like ripples across a pond. The streams mirrored the lantern's glow, doubling the lights and the quiet sense of connection between all things. At the center of the village, a small shrine awaited. Here, the lanterns were set down, one by one, floating upon shallow pools, drifting slowly as if guided by unseen hands. The Asahi and Yuru seemed to gather these lights, their waters carrying warmth and quiet through the night. You knelt beside one lantern, watching its flame flicker and bend. In its soft light, you understood that every journey, every step along the silent path, had been a lesson in presence to observe, to feel, and to rest. The night was complete, yet only halfway through its calm. You rose slowly, letting the lantern trail guide you back to the inn, the gentle glow of the streams accompanying your steps. Chapter 22: The Misty Morning. Morning arrived quietly, the village wrapped in a pale mist that softened every edge. Roofs, trees, and paths seemed to float, as if held by invisible threads. You stepped outside, the ground cool beneath your feet. Each breath carried the scent of wet earth and pine. The streams were barely visible, their surfaces blurred by the fog, yet you could hear them clearly. Asahi laughing lightly, Yuru whispering slowly. The path between them appeared dreamlike, moss-covered stones shining faintly. Every step was cushioned, every movement deliberate. Birds sang in the distance, their notes floating through the mist, unhurried and delicate. You strolled, listening to the hidden sounds of Mizunara. Somewhere, a rooster crowed softly. Somewhere else, water trickled over a small stone dam. The mist embraced the village like a gentle hand, and for a long while, you let yourself move without purpose, only presence. It was a morning that seemed suspended, holding time itself in quiet, unbroken calm. Chapter 23: The Bamboo Flute. Later, you found a craftsman in a small workshop at the edge of the village, shaping bamboo into flutes. His hands moved with deliberate patience, each cut precise, each hole carefully placed. "You may try," he said softly, handing you a half-finished flute. Its surface was smooth, cool to the touch. You lifted it to your lips, and the first note emerged soft, uneven, but full of life. The sound resonated with the streams outside, with the rustle of leaves, with the hum of the village. Each attempt improved, not through effort, but by listening. The craftsman nodded, eyes closed, letting your music mingle with his own. Outside, the Asahi and Yuru carried the notes further, weaving them through the trees and stones, past houses and fields, until the entire village seemed to hum softly in tune. You lowered the flute and exhaled, feeling a quiet connection to everything around you: the streams, the wind, the earth, and the hands that had shaped the bamboo long before you arrived. For a moment, there was no distinction between player and instrument, listener and sound, only the gentle flow of life, present and unbroken. Chapter 24: The Twilight Reflection. The sun had begun its descent, painting the valley in soft shades of amber and rose. From the terrace above Mizunara, you looked out over the streams, watching Asahi shimmer with light and Yuru deepen into quiet shadow. The village was hushed, as if holding its breath in reverence for the coming night. Lanterns flickered faintly, reflecting on the water, doubling the calm of the evening. The wind carried the scent of pine, earth, and distant blossoms. You sat at the edge of the terrace, allowing the light and shadow to move over you. Memories of the path, the cave, the hermit, the festival of shadows, and the bamboo flutes all mingled into a single, gentle current. In that quiet reflection, you felt the streams not only outside you but inside Asahi's laughter. Yuru's steady whisper reminding you that life's rhythm could be both lively and calm, intertwined and inseparable. No hurry pressed upon you. No thought demanded attention. Only the soft glow of the village, the gentle motion of the streams, and the slow, steady pulse of your own breath. You exhaled deeply, letting the day fold into the night, and felt a peace that was both new and eternal. Chapter 25: The Silent Path. Night fully descended, and the village seemed to sink into a soft, unbroken silence. The lanterns along the paths dimmed gradually, leaving only the faint glimmer reflected in the streams. You walked once more along the moss-covered path between Asahi and Yuru, lantern now held only for ceremony, not necessity. Each step felt light, each breath connected to the rhythm of water, wind, and earth. The streams were companions, their voices distinct yet intertwined. Asahi sparkled with gentle laughter. Yuru deepened the stillness, carrying all that had passed through its waters. Together, they guided you along the silent path, a path not marked by distance or time, but by presence, listening, and quiet wonder. At the end of the trail, where the streams curved away and the pines leaned overhead, you paused. The night wrapped around you like a familiar blanket. And you realized that this path, this silence, would always be with you in waking moments, in dreams, and in the spaces between. You sat upon a stone, closing your eyes, letting the world dissolve into the sound of water, the sigh of wind, the steady beat of your own heart. The silent path between two streams was not merely a place but a state of being, one that would carry you gently, endlessly, toward sleep. And with that, you allowed yourself to drift, fully, into the calm of night. Petals carried by the mountain breeze. Prologue whisper of the breeze. High in the northern mountains of Japan, the wind moved as gently as the hand of a careful painter. It carried with it the faint fragrance of cherry blossoms, scattered like soft brushstrokes across the evening sky. The petals turned slowly in the air, some rising, some falling, each one moving without haste, as though time itself had slowed to listen. Beyond the ridges, where clouds lingered like pale silk, a small village waited in the valley. Its rooftops were tiled with moss, its streets quiet with the hush of twilight. No hurried footsteps disturbed the silence, only the distant sound of water, moving calmly down from the mountain, could be heard. It was here, between stone paths and wooden houses, that the journey began. A journey not of distance, but of stillness, guided by the mountain breeze, by drifting petals, and by the quiet stories whispered when the world is ready to sleep. Chapter 1: The Old Village Lanterns. The first lanterns were lit at dusk. Their glow was not sharp, but soft, as though the fire within them breathed with a calm rhythm. One by one, lanterns lined the narrow streets of the mountain village, their light cooling like warm circles on the stone ground. A traveler strolled along the path, listening to the faint rustle of the evening. Each step was met by the quiet touch of the breeze, carrying with it the fragrance of pine and earth. The air was cool, yet gentle, as though the mountain itself wished to soothe all who entered. Children's laughter drifted faintly from a courtyard, fading as quickly as it came, leaving behind only the steady song of a nightbird calling from the woods. Wooden doors closed softly, and the sound of water being poured into clay cups echoed faintly from inside the houses. The traveler paused in front of an old bridge. A lantern hung at its center, swaying ever so slightly in the wind. Below, the river moved with calm determination, its ripples catching the orange glow of fading sunlight. The sight was neither grand nor ordinary, it was simply enough. And in that moment, with petals brushing past and lanterns watching like quiet guardians, the village seemed to breathe in harmony with the mountain breeze. Chapter 2: The Path Along the River. The river flowed as though it had always known its way. Clear water glided over smooth stones, whispering in a voice that was neither hurried nor loud. The traveler followed its path, step by step, listening to the endless murmur that seemed to come from both the earth and the sky. Cherry petals, carried down from the village trees, drifted along the current. Some clung to the surface, circling slowly before being drawn away. Others settled on the banks, resting among blades of grass that bent gently with the breeze. On one side of the path stood tall bamboo, their slender bodies swaying together like quiet companions. Each time the wind touched them, a soft chorus arose, a rustling sound that blended with the song of the river. The air was cool, filled with scents of damp earth and pine resin. Occasionally, a stone lantern appeared beside the trail, its surface worn by years of rain and moss. Though unlit, it seemed alive in its stillness, a guardian of the path, watching over those who passed in silence. The traveler paused, kneeling near the water's edge. A small fish flickered beneath the ripples, silver scales glinting in the fading light. The sight was brief, yet somehow eternal, one quiet heartbeat in the rhythm of the mountain. The path curved gently, never straight, as if guiding the traveler deeper, not just into the valley, but into a slower state of being. Each step was softer than the last, until walking became almost like floating, carried by the same unseen breeze that guided the petals above. By the time twilight deepened, the river's voice seemed to have entered the traveler's chest. Every breath matched its flow. Every thought drifted away, like blossoms carried downstream. Chapter 3: The Silent Temple. Beyond the river, the path rose gently toward the mountainside. There, half veiled by cedar trees, stood a small temple. Its wooden gates, painted long ago in red, had faded into a quiet brown. The scent of incense lingered faintly in the air, as though time itself had been offering prayers for centuries. A bell hung in the courtyard. Though untouched, it seemed to hum with memory. When the breeze passed through, a faint vibration stirred within the traveler's chest, as if echoing from some distant, invisible realm. Stone steps led upward. Moss had grown thick upon them, softening each rise. The traveler moved slowly, hand brushing against the wooden rail worn smooth by countless pilgrims. Each step was not simply forward, it was inward, a descent into stillness. At the top, the main hall awaited. Its doors stood open, welcoming without words. Inside, the light was dim, touched only by the faint glow of candles. The air was cooler here, holding both the hush of the forest and the warmth of human devotion. The traveler knelt upon the tatami. Outside, the sound of the river still faintly reached, like a memory carried through the trees. Within, silence gathered in layers so thick, so profound, that even the smallest thought dissolved like smoke. A single petal drifted across the threshold, carried by the mountain breeze. It came to rest upon the wooden floor, fragile and luminous in the candlelight. For a long moment, nothing else moved. And in that stillness, the traveler understood the temple did not ask for prayers. It offered only space for quiet, for breath, for rest. When the traveler finally rose to leave, the bell sounded, though no hand had touched it. Its tone was deep, endless, like a voice calling from the heart of the mountain itself. The sound lingered long after the temple had faded from view, carried on the breeze with the drifting petals, guiding the traveler onward. Chapter 4: The Garden of Moss and Stone. At the edge of the temple grounds, beyond a wooden gate half hidden by vines, lay a garden. It was not large, but it seemed endless in the way silence can feel infinite. Stones had been arranged with a care that suggested not design, but discovery, as though they had been waiting in just those places for centuries. Moss spread like a soft green ocean, climbing over rocks, reaching up the base of lanterns, covering forgotten steps. Dew sparkled faintly upon it, catching what little light remained of the late afternoon. The traveler stepped quietly into the garden, following a narrow path of flat stones. Each footfall was careful, as though not to disturb the hush that lingered in the air. At the far end of the path, an old man was kneeling beside a stone basin. His hair was silver, his robes the color of faded earth. With a bamboo ladle, he poured water slowly over the basin's rim, letting it trickle into the moss below. The traveler paused, not wishing to intrude. But the man looked up, eyes calm and kind, and with the faintest smile, he gestured for the traveler to approach. "Every stone has its place," the old man said, voice as gentle as the breeze. "But moss finds its own way. It teaches us patience." The traveler knelt beside him. The sound of water dripping into the moss was steady, like a slow heartbeat. "Does the garden belong to you?" the traveler asked softly. The man shook his head. "No, I belong to the garden. I have tended it for many years, yet it has shaped me more than I have shaped it." They sat together for a time, without words. The scent of cedar drifted down from the trees above. A crow called once in the distance, then silence returned. When the traveler finally rose to leave, the old man bowed. "Wherever you walk," he said, "remember that stillness can grow, like moss, even upon the hardest stone." The traveler bowed in return, carrying the words as quietly as petals carried by the wind. Chapter 5: Tea Beneath the Moon. The path from the garden wound downward, leading the traveler back toward the village. Night had fully descended, and the lanterns glowed brighter against the darkness. At the edge of the village stood a small tea house. Its paper doors were open, spilling warm light onto the road. The fragrance of roasted tea drifted into the night air, inviting without insistence. Inside, an elderly woman stood behind the counter. Her movements were slow, deliberate, as though each gesture was part of a quiet ritual. She greeted the traveler with a bow and motioned toward a low table near the window. The traveler sat, the tatami cool beneath the knees. Outside, the moon had risen above the mountains, round and pale, casting silver light across the rooftops. The woman placed a tray upon the table. On it rested a simple clay cup, steam rising from within. The tea was green, its color deep, its scent both grassy and sweet. As the traveler lifted the cup, the woman spoke. "This tea comes from the hillside just beyond the river. The leaves are gathered by hand at dawn, when the mist still clings to the fields." The traveler tasted. The warmth spread slowly, filling the chest, the arms, the breath. It was as if the mountain itself had been poured into liquid form. For a while, they spoke softly. The woman told of the seasons: the blush of plum blossoms in late winter, the fireflies of summer nights, the crimson maples of autumn. Each word painted an image that seemed to float in the steam rising from the tea. When silence returned, it was not empty but full of warmth, of moonlight, of unspoken understanding. Before the traveler left, the woman pressed a small pouch of tea leaves into their hand. "Carry the taste of this night with you," she said, "so that wherever you wander, the mountain will follow." The traveler bowed deeply. Stepping back into the moonlit road, the world seemed quieter, softer, as though the tea itself had entered the breeze, guiding each step forward. Chapter 6: Voices of the Pines. Ren left the tea house with the small pouch of leaves tucked safely inside his satchel. The night was cool, but not cold, and the moonlight traced silver paths along the narrow road. Ahead, the mountain rose dark and quiet, its ridges softened by mist. Soon, the path led him into a forest of pines. Their tall shapes swayed gently above, and the air was filled with the scent of resin and needles. Each time the breeze passed through, the trees whispered not in words, but in tones, a deep and endless chorus that seemed older than memory. Ren slowed his steps. He had always felt a strange comfort among trees, as though they accepted him without question. Tonight, the sound of the pines felt almost like voices, speaking just beyond the edge of understanding. He stopped by a clearing where moonlight poured through the branches. Sitting upon a fallen trunk, he closed his eyes. The pines continued their soft chorus, a sound like breathing, like waves, like distant chanting. In that rhythm, thoughts of his journey returned, places he had left behind, paths yet unknown. For a moment, a question rose within him: was he searching for something? Or had he simply been walking, guided only by the breeze? The whispering of the pines grew steadier, as though answering. Though no words formed, Ren felt the message clearly: it is enough to walk. It is enough to listen. The mountain itself will show the way. When he opened his eyes, a single pine cone had fallen beside him, resting gently in the grass. He picked it up, turning it in his hands. Its scales were firm, yet delicate, arranged with quiet perfection. Ren smiled faintly. He slipped the pine cone into his satchel, beside the pouch of tea. Then he rose, bowing once to the forest as if to old companions, and continued his walk through the moonlit path. Chapter 7: Fireflies along the field. By the time Ren emerged from the forest, the air had grown warmer. The path led downward into a wide field, where tall grasses swayed under the night sky. crickets sang steadily, their chorus rising and falling like the pulse of the earth. And then he saw them fireflies. They floated above the grass in slow, glowing arcs, their lights blinking softly in the dark. Some rose high into the air before fading. Others lingered low among the stalks, shining like stars scattered upon the earth. Wren stopped at the edge of the field, watching in silence. The fireflies moved without haste, each carrying a tiny lantern of its own. The sight stirred something within him, an old memory, half forgotten. When he was a child, Wren had once followed fireflies along a river near his home. He remembered chasing their glow with small, eager steps, his laughter mingling with the summer night. He remembered the sound of his mother's voice calling him back, soft but clear, guiding him through the darkness. The memory faded, but its warmth remained. As Wren stood lost in thought, he noticed another figure in the field, a young girl, perhaps no more than 12, cupping her hands gently around a firefly. She turned and saw him, her eyes wide but unafraid. "Don't worry," she whispered, as though afraid the firefly might hear. She opened her hands, and the tiny light drifted upward, blinking once before vanishing into the night. Wren bowed slightly, and the girl smiled before running back toward a farmhouse at the far end of the field. A lantern glowed there, and the faint outline of her family waiting at the doorway. Wren remained for a while longer, surrounded by the silent lanterns of the fireflies. He felt their rhythm enter his breath, as though the night itself were breathing with him. When he finally continued down the path, the glow of the fireflies followed for a time, like gentle companions lighting the way. Chapter 8: The Bridge of Morning Mist. When the first light of dawn touched the mountains, Wren awoke to a world softened by mist. The air was cool, damp with dew, and every blade of grass glistened like a thread of silver. He stretched slowly, listening to the faint murmur of the river nearby. The path led him to a bridge of weathered wood that arched gently across the water. Mist curled above the river's surface, so thick that the far bank seemed a dream, half real, half vanished into cloud. Wren paused at the edge, hand resting on the railing. The wood was smooth from years of passing hands. Beneath him, the water moved slowly, its ripples muffled by the mist. As he stepped onto the bridge, he noticed a figure already standing at its center, an elderly fisherman with a bamboo hat, holding a net that dripped faintly with water. The man's back was slightly bent, yet his stance was firm, as if rooted into the planks. "Good morning," Wren said softly, not wishing to break the stillness too harshly. The fisherman turned, his eyes calm, weathered by years of river and sun. He nodded. "The river is generous this morning," he said, lifting the net slightly. Within it, several silver fish glimmered like fragments of the dawn. Wren watched the fish shimmer. "Do you come here every day?" The man smiled faintly. "Every day is different. The mist, the current, the sky, none are ever the same. That is why I return." They stood together, watching the river slip beneath the bridge. The fisherman then gestured toward the far bank. "There is a village beyond. Cross, and you will hear its morning song." Ren bowed in thanks and continued across. Each step carried him deeper into the mist, until even the fisherman behind him faded. When he reached the far end, the air cleared, and the faint sound of voices and clattering reached his ears. The promise of a new day awaited. Chapter 9 Songs of the Market Street. Ren entered the village as the sun began to climb. The mist thinned, revealing wooden houses clustered around a narrow street. The air was alive with sound: the calls of merchants, the laughter of children, the clatter of cartwheels over stones. Stalls lined the road, their awnings striped in faded colors. The fragrance of roasted chestnuts mingled with the sharp scent of pickled vegetables and the sweetness of rice cakes. Ren walked slowly, letting the bustle surround him. After nights of solitude, the noise felt almost overwhelming, yet not unwelcome. It was like stepping into a river of voices, each one carrying its own story. At one stall, a woman waved him over. Her table was filled with small carved figures, animals, birds, and even tiny human forms, each no larger than a thumb. Their details were delicate, as though life itself had been coaxed into the wood. "You have a traveler's look," she said with a smile. "Take one for luck." Ren picked up a small carving of a crane, its wings outstretched in mid-flight. The wood was smooth, light in his hand. "How much?" he asked. The woman shook her head. "No coin. Only a promise that when you look at it, you will remember this street, these voices." "That is enough." Ren bowed deeply, slipping the crane into his satchel beside the pinecone and the tea pouch. He continued down the street, the chorus of merchants echoing around him. Fresh herbs, gathered at dawn, sweet dumplings, still warm, cloth from the southern port. Children darted between stalls, their laughter ringing like bells. An old man played a shamisen at the corner, his notes weaving through the chaos like a quiet thread of order. For the first time in many days, Ren felt not only peace, but warmth, a reminder that journeys are not just through forests and rivers, but through the living songs of those who share the path. As he left the market street, he carried its music within him, each note as delicate as petals drifting on the mountain breeze. Chapter 10 The Hidden Shrine in the Bamboo Grove. The market village slowly faded behind Ren as he followed a narrow path that led toward the hills. The bustle of voices grew distant, replaced once more by the hush of nature. Soon, the road curved into a dense grove of bamboo, their tall green stalks rising like pillars into the sky. The air within the grove was cool, even though the sun had climbed high. Each gust of wind sent ripples through the bamboo, making them bend and sway, their hollow stalks knocking gently against one another with a sound like quiet drums. Ren walked softly, feeling the earth damp beneath his sandals. The path grew narrower until it seemed almost swallowed by the bamboo itself. Just as he wondered if he had strayed too far, he noticed a small wooden torii gate half hidden among the stalks. Beyond it lay a hidden shrine. Its roof was moss-covered, its wood faded with age, yet it stood with quiet dignity. No villagers seemed to come here. Often spiderwebs stretched between the eaves, and fallen leaves carpeted the stone steps. Ren approached and bowed at the gate. He felt a strange stillness, as if the shrine itself was waiting. On the offering stand lay a few withered flowers and a small dish, empty but carefully cleaned. Someone, it seemed, still came here from time to time. As Ren stood in silence, a soft sound reached his ears, the patter of feet. A boy appeared from behind the shrine, no older than 10, carrying a bucket of water. His eyes widened when he saw Ren, but then he relaxed, offering a shy smile. "You found our shrine," the boy said. "Not many people do." Ren bowed lightly. "It feels like a place meant to be discovered by accident." The boy nodded, setting down the bucket. He poured water into the dish and placed a fresh sprig of wildflowers beside it. "My grandmother says the spirit here is gentle, but lonely. I come to keep it company." Ren felt a warmth in the boy's words. Together, they knelt before the shrine. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the bamboo, whispering in the breeze. When Ren finally rose to continue his journey, the boy handed him a small folded paper charm. "For safe travels," he said with a grin. Ren thanked him, slipping the charm into his satchel. As he walked away, he glanced back once. The boy was still there, pouring water carefully, as though tending to both the shrine and the silence that lived within it. Chapter 11. Rain over the thatched roofs. Clouds gathered as Ren left the bamboo grove, their shapes heavy and gray against the afternoon sky. The air grew damp, the scent of rain sharp and fresh. By the time he reached the next village, the first drops had begun to fall. The village was small, with thatched roof houses clustered along a winding stream. Smoke curled faintly from chimneys, carrying the smell of wood fire. As the rain quickened, villagers hurried indoors, sliding shut their wooden doors. Ren found shelter beneath the eaves of a tea house. The owner, a kindly man with broad shoulders and gentle eyes, noticed him waiting outside and beckoned him in. "Travelers shouldn't stand in the rain," the man said warmly. "Come, sit. The storm will pass soon enough." Inside, the room was lit by a single lantern, its glow soft against the wooden walls. A kettle steamed over the hearth, filling the air with comfort. Ren sat gratefully, placing his damp satchel at his side. The man poured 2 cups of tea and set one before Ren. "I've seen many travelers stop here when the rains come," he said. "Each one carries a story, even if they do not speak it." Ren smiled faintly. "And do you ask them to share?" "Only if they wish. Rain has its own way of loosening words, though." They sat listening to the storm outside. The rain drummed steadily on the thatched roof, a sound both lively and calming. Now and then, Thunder rolled faintly in the distance, softened by the mountains. Ren sipped the tea, its warmth spreading through him. He thought of the charm the boy had given him, of the crane carving, of the pine cone, and the pouch of tea. Each small gift felt like a thread, weaving his journey into something larger than his own footsteps. The man poured a little more tea into his cup. When I was young, I used to think journeys were about reaching far places. But now I see they are about the moments in between. The pauses, the rainfalls, the strangers who share their hearth. Ren nodded, feeling the truth of the words. By the time the rain slowed, the village seemed renewed. The roofs glistened, the earth steamed softly, and the stream beside the houses carried new life in its flow. Ren bowed in thanks to the teahouse owner before stepping back onto the damp road. The man called after him, "May the rain follow you kindly, and not harshly." Ren smiled, carrying the blessing with him as he continued into the fresh, rain-washed evening. Chapter 12 Lanterns by the Riverside. By the time Ren reached the next village, night had already begun to settle. But unlike the quiet hamlets he had passed before, this place shimmered with light. Along the riverbank, lanterns floated one by one, their flames glowing softly against the dark water. Children laughed as they guided the lanterns downstream. Families gathered on the bridges, their faces lit by the gentle flicker of fire. The air was filled with the scent of grilled fish and sweet dumplings, drifting from stalls that lined the road. Ren paused, taking in the sight. The river, alive with lanterns, seemed like a flowing sky of stars. Each lantern carried a small message or prayer, written in careful strokes on its paper sides. Wishes for health, for love, for safe journeys. As he walked along the bank, a young girl tugged at his sleeve. She held a small lantern, its paper sides still blank. "Would you like to write one too, traveler?" she asked, her eyes shining. Ren hesitated. He had carried no ink, no brush. But the girl's mother approached, smiling, and handed him both. He thought for a long while before writing a single character, Jing Stillness. The girl watched as he placed the lantern on the river. Together they saw it drift away, carried gently by the current. "Where will it go?" Ren asked softly. The girl grinned. "As far as it needs to." The crowd cheered as more lanterns joined the stream, the river glowing brighter with each passing moment. For Ren, the sight was not only beautiful, it was comforting. Every lantern carried a story, just as every step of his journey carried its own light. When he finally left the riverside, the lanterns continued to drift, their glow following him into the night like quiet companions. Chapter 13 Echoes of the Mountain Bell. The path beyond the village climbed steeply, winding back into the mountains. Ren walked slowly, the sounds of the festival fading behind him. Soon the air grew cooler, filled with the scent of cedar and stone. At the top of a ridge, he found a small temple perched upon the cliffs. Its gate stood open, welcoming the night wind. A single bell hung in the courtyard, tall and dark, its surface worn by centuries of hands and prayers. Ren stood before it, gazing up at its still form. The silence of the mountain pressed in around him, broken only by the faint call of an owl. Then, without a hand to strike it, the bell began to sound. Its deep tone rolled through the night, low and steady, like the earth itself breathing. The sound filled Ren's chest, vibrating through his bones, reaching into thoughts he had not spoken aloud. Each step, each meeting, each silence, the bell seemed to say, "All are part of the same path." Ren closed his eyes, letting the resonance wash over him. He thought of the fisherman in the mist, the boy at the shrine, the fireflies, the market voices, the lanterns drifting away. Each memory rang within the bell's voice, merging into something greater than himself. When the final note faded, the night felt even more still, as if holding its breath. Ren bowed deeply before the bell, gratitude heavy in his chest. As he turned to leave, he noticed a monk standing at the doorway of the temple, watching quietly. Their eyes met, and the monk nodded once, as though to say the mountain has spoken. Continue. Ren descended the path once more, the echo of the bell following him, guiding his steps as surely as the breeze that carried the petals. Chapter 14: The Traveler's Inn at Dusk. Ren descended the mountain trail as the sun began to melt into the horizon, painting the sky with shades of gold and rose. The air grew softer, the evening calm wrapping around him like a warm cloak. Ahead, he saw a small inn, its wooden sign swaying gently in the breeze. Smoke spiraled from the chimney, carrying the rich scent of cooking into the cool air. The inn seemed welcoming, a quiet beacon after days of wandering. Inside, the common room was filled with travelers. Some were seated in silence, drinking tea, others spoke in hushed tones, sharing stories of distant villages or mountain paths. The fire crackled in the hearth, its warmth spreading slowly through the room. Ren found a corner seat and removed his satchel, letting his eyes drift over the room. The air was thick with the comforting weight of stories, laughter, and quiet reflections. A young woman with a sketchbook caught his attention. Her pencil moved lightly across the page, capturing the firelight in delicate strokes. She glanced up at him and smiled, and in that simple gesture, Ren felt an unexpected recognition, as though he had met her not for the first time, but in some other life, or in a dream. The innkeeper approached with a steaming bowl of soup. "You've traveled far," he said. "Sit, eat, and rest. Sometimes journeys teach more when hearts are quiet." Ren nodded, grateful. As he ate, he observed the other travelers, each with their own pace, their own quiet journeys. The warmth of shared space, the subtle murmur of stories, reminded him once again that paths often cross when least expected. Chapter 15: Stories by the Hearth. As night deepened, the common room grew quieter. The fire cast long shadows across the walls, flickering like soft memories. Ren's attention returned to the young woman with the sketchbook. She spoke first, her voice calm, carrying a quiet curiosity. "I've been drawing the mountains all day. They seem alive, moving in ways only the wind can understand." Ren nodded. "The mountains guide you, even when you are not aware of it." They spoke for hours, sharing fragments of their journeys. The woman's name was Aiko, and she, too, had wandered the northern valleys seeking something she could not yet name. Together, their words intertwined, stories overlapping, and in the quiet glow of the hearth, Ren realized that this meeting was different from all the others. It was not a fleeting encounter, nor a simple exchange of kindness. It was a deep understanding, a resonance of spirit. And in that resonance, Ren felt a spark, a whisper from the mountains, carried on the wind. This is not an end. There is more to see, more to walk, more to become. When they finally stepped outside, the inn behind them glimmering faintly under the stars, Ren and Aiko walked along the quiet road. Lanterns hung on distant fences, the breeze rustled the trees, and petals from the distant cherry groves drifted like gentle reminders. They did not speak for a while. Each step was measured, yet effortless, as though the path itself guided them. Ren looked at Aiko and felt a certainty he had never known before, that journeys are never truly complete. They only transform when hearts meet, when the breeze carries a whisper, and when the next step calls. The mountains rose before them, cloaked in moonlight. And as they began their new journey together, Ren understood that every meeting, every lantern, every bell, and every whispered breeze had led him here to a new beginning. Chapter 16. Morning beside the river. The dawn after the night at the inn was cool and fresh. Mist once again drifted above the river, softening the edges of the world. Ren and Aiko walked together along the water's edge, their footsteps quiet, their breaths slow in the morning air. Ren glanced at her sketchbook, now tucked beneath her arm. "Will you draw this morning, too?" he asked. Aiko smiled. "Perhaps. But sometimes it is enough to walk without capturing anything. To let the moment stay as it is." Ren nodded, understanding. For the first time, he did not feel the solitude that had marked his journey until now. The river's song seemed fuller, as though carrying two voices instead of one. They paused at a bend in the path where cherry blossoms leaned over the water, petals falling gently into the current. Aiko reached out, catching one on her palm. "Do you think the river remembers where each petal comes from?" she asked softly. Ren looked at the drifting water. "Perhaps not. But the breeze remembers. And the heart does, too." The petal slipped from her hand and floated away. They watched it vanish downstream, carried by the same breeze that had always guided Ren. Chapter 17. The Mountain Road. The path grew steeper as they entered the foothills once more. Pines rose high above, their whispers weaving together like an endless song. The air carried the scent of earth after rain, sharp and alive. Ren found himself remembering the words of the old man in the moss garden, the fisherman on the bridge, the boy tending the hidden shrine. Each memory felt like a stone on the path, small, but necessary, shaping the way forward. Aiko walked beside him in silence, occasionally sketching a line in her book, then closing it again. She seemed to understand the rhythm of the road, not rushing, not pausing too long, always attuned to the breathing of the mountain. When they reached a small clearing, they stopped to rest. From here, the valley stretched below, the villages glimmering faintly in the distance. "It feels like everything connects," Aiko said quietly. "The river, the fields, the people, even the silence. All threads of the same cloth." Ren breathed deeply. "And now, our steps are part of it, too." They sat together in the clearing until the breeze shifted, carrying the faint scent of plum blossoms. The road awaited, patient as always. Final chapter returned to the breeze. Evening came once more. The mountains glowed in the last light, their ridges painted in gold and shadow. Ren and Aiko walked along a ridge where the wind moved freely, carrying with it the distant sound of a temple bell. They stopped at the crest. Below them, the valley stretched wide, touched by the glow of countless lanterns from villages scattered like stars. The sight was quiet yet vast, both intimate and infinite. Ren closed his eyes, letting the breeze wash over him. For the first time, he did not feel as though he was searching. The path ahead was no longer a question, but an invitation. Beside him, Aiko stood with her sketchbook open, but she did not draw. Instead, she simply looked out over the valley, her eyes reflecting the lantern glow. Ren turned to her. "Where shall we go next?" Aiko smiled, the breeze lifting her hair. "Wherever the wind carries us." The mountain wind rose gently, lifting a swirl of petals from the ridge. They drifted around the two travelers, circling once before floating into the wide evening sky. Together, Ren and Aiko stepped forward. Not toward an ending, but toward a beginning guided by the same breeze that had always carried the petals. Always whispered through the mountains, always waited for the quiet heart to listen. And so, with the mountain breeze at their backs, their journey continued.